Hello and welcome to the presentation of real-time global illumination in Viz Artist 3.9. So in Viz 3.9 we got a new feature, as the title says of the demo, it's global illumination. So we can do global illumination in real time with a new invention that we have, which I want to show first off with a simple example of a Cornell box. I think every 3D designer knows the Cornell box and knows the functionality of the Cornell box. So here it's all about, in this little model, to show we have a red wall, we have a green wall, and we have a blue floor. So if light shoots through the roof, through these holes, it needs to bounce the light onto the walls and onto the floor, and the light bounces into this room around. And through the bounces, it needs to spread and bleed the colors accordingly to the correct objects and faces. So when I go in here and choose one of my surfaces and start changing the color, we see immediately that the side of our cube is getting either blue, red, green, but not faked with a texture. This is done via the radiosity setting of the light. So if I would go to my light menu, I have my spotlight, which is casting also a shadow. By the way, if I move that, we see the moving shadows. And also the shadows are affecting the radiosity, as we see, and also the global illumination inside the system. So for this light, I have a radiosity setting, and if I increase the radiosity setting or decrease, we see we get either more or less bleed from the colors back into the environment. If I start the animation with this little logo that we're having, so it's the Vizrt logo, we see the shadows are casting correct, and even these shadows are casted in real time, as we see, onto the wall, onto the floor, or onto the other objects. So whenever I bring in now a new color and introduce that color, it starts to modify the whole scenery. So if I come in and create an orange cube instead of, we see immediately this cube needs to emit the light orange onto the roof. So this is in general the functionality of the global illumination. So I have a little more advanced example where we use this global illumination inside a virtual studio. In the old days, we needed to bake virtual studios with standard render engines, post-render engines from the market. There is tons of render engines around, but the problem is it's post-processing. So it is not dynamic. You need to bake the shadows, you need to bake the lights, and therefore you get static results. You get very beautiful results, with, depending on the render engine you take, but you get always static results. So the example which I'm showing here for this virtual studio, if I start to rotate, we see immediately the lights are reflected on the floor, the lights are changing depending where I am inside the studio, and this is all done dynamically. But the light is also reflected and represented properly on these surfaces, because what we are using here in combination is Substance. So the company Allegorithmic created the Substance shaders, which are state-of-the-art and standard tools for the game industry and also for the broadcast industry. So these are PBR materials. PBR means physical-based rendering materials. So they are physically based correct. This is why we get this realistic look. But they are not only physical-based, these materials, they are also procedural materials. So meaning this allows me to create changes at any time. So if I click on my surface, on my wooden floor surface, I see I have a few different settings. For the ambient intensity, I have my shader in here. I can change the tiling. All that goes dynamically with taking in consideration the lighting. But if I want to do a little bit more on this one, I go to adjust the properties, and this opens now the Allegorithmic Substance window, which allows me to change the output size from 1K to a 2K map. So I have more sharpness or less sharpness, depending on what you want to do with these textures. And I can change a couple of other things, like the normal intensity or the roughness value. So in that case, I want to change the roughness value, and I want to have a stronger light reflection on this one. So by taking away or decreasing the roughness value, we see the light is getting represented in much more rough way. I can do the same on the walls over here, so we see the light is represented correctly on this wall. and depending where the camera moves, we get the light reflection. My personal taste would say now, okay, let's go in and play a little bit with the structure that we're having here. So again, this is a procedural shader using the global illumination system to create this realistic effect. If I go into this one and check the properties, these are the properties for my wood. And we see this wood wall has total different properties than the wood floor. So here, again, I can decrease the roughness of my wood if I want to have a strong reflection or if I want to have only a very, very soft reflection of my light represented. I can change the amount of fibers, the amount of knots. All this is done via procedurals and increasing the normal intensity. So I have a stronger bump now on this wall. So let's go back and play a little bit with the radiosity inside this setup. I want to concentrate to this wall over here, this wooden wall, and show you the light conditions. So inside this scene I have a couple of lights in usage, and there is one spotlight which hits that right wall. So let me turn off a couple of other lights, and we see immediately the studio needs to get darker, and this one spotlight can relight the rest of the scene, and as we see it's lighting it dynamically, but I also can increase the radiosity. So if a light shoots on a brown wall and I have a high radiosity setting, it needs to bounce the photons from this light back throughout the whole set. And by increasing the radiosity, it starts to bleed this color completely into the rest of my studio. So this is a very nice and neat way to show how the radiosity is working. A little bit more, if I shoot now on the roof, we see there is no orange. I'm not bleeding any colors. But there's an orange light bar on the roof and this circle. So if I hit that one exactly, it starts to bleed again back into my scene. Depending where I am, I get correct reflections and the representation of the light throughout my scene. What I want to do next is again shoot to this wall and turn on a few more lights and give you the idea what I also can do. Let me make this a little bit darker and a little bit less intensity from the fill light. On the beginning we see how it's getting represented over here. If I make it strong or less strong. I want to change now the material of this wall. So just that you get an idea how long it would take you with a post-render engine compared to our real-time engine with the global illumination system. So on this wall I'm using a wooden texture again, and I just want to change this one to ceramic tiles. So I just go to my Substance database. We have the databases imported. So when importing 3D objects from any standard application, meaning Autodesk Maya, Autodesk 3D Max, or Max on Cinema, you can use Houdini. We're supporting all these formats. If you have applied a Substance on this one, it will look exactly the same in our render engine, because Substance is PBR materials, which means physical-based rendering materials. They always look exactly the same and behave correct in light. So I'm going to the latest database from the Substance source, which was released about a month ago. And I'm going to find some different materials. Instead of wood, I go to some tiles and use these ceramic tiles. And I go to my settings and just adjust with the procedurals what I really want from this material. So first of all, I want to have a high resolution. I want to have a 2K map on this one. Then I have a couple of tiles in here, but I want to change the parameters of these tiles. So let's go in again and say we want to have more. I'll just scroll down, and there is a number of tiles. So I either decrease the number of tiles or I increase. So I have more tiles. The tiles color can be specified here, and I also can have a color variance. So we have some darker, some lighter tiles in here. If I go down, I have less color variance. If I have that up, I have a very high color variance in. I can put in a dirt on this one, so the dirt is applied again via procedural. So everything is dynamically adjustable in real time for the artist. So if I want to change the color over here, let's do some kind of crazy color. And we have these tiles here. We concentrate on them. We see we get the light correctly represented and everything. So if we want to have a look on the radiosity, we see now the radiosity of this object if I increase that one, it's bleeding now this purple color back into my studio. All done in real time without any post-processing or rendering. So this is what the global illumination system in combination with the Substance shaders can do for you. If you're interested to know more in detail, you're very welcome to visit one of our professional artists on the booth, and they are happy to show you everything about the features.